So good evening or good morning to everybody. So on the behalf of the IWS, the Internationale Wirtschaftssenat, I would like to welcome you to our roundtable, the New United States. So I'm really happy to see that we have a lot of attendees today to that amazing topic. So unfortunately, our CEO, Thomas Limberger, can't take part, but I should say hi. So also very warm welcome to our speakers, Senator Boxer, James Sigler, and Maurice Reed. I think he is here, he should. So, and also to our host today, which is Ali Aslan and David Noah. So just a quick rundown how it will work today. We will listen to the speeches, and after the speeches, I will open the floor to an open discussion. You can just write your questions or comments into the chat, and we will read them out, or you will just raise your virtual hand and we will unmute you. So thank you so much for participating today, and I will hand over to David.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be involved today, and a special honor to be able to introduce the first speaker, Senator Barbara Boxer. Senator Boxer, as some of you may know, has a story to tell, unlike the story that most people could tell who have been in the political sphere for a long time. She was in the House from 1983 until 1993. And then served 4 terms in the Senate from 1993 to 2017, when she then decided not to rerun. What's very interesting about Senator Boxer, among other things, is she served, of course, on the Foreign Relations Committee with Senator Biden when he was chair. So she knows him best in that standpoint, and not just from the political policy standpoint. And also, when she decided not to run for re-election, her seat was taken in the Senate by Kamala Harris, the vice president. So I don't know too many people who are as qualified to speak to us today as she is. And so you're here to listen to me. So let me turn it over to Senator Boxer.
Well, thank you so much, David. And thank you for this opportunity to share some thoughts with you as America transitions to a calmer, more predictable, and more experienced government. First, I want to briefly address the recent deplorable events that happened at our Capitol, the citadel of our democracy. It will go down as one of the darkest days in American history. I worked at that Capitol for 34 years, as David explained, 10 years in the House, 24 in the Senate. I revere that place. I revere it. Every time I walked into the Capitol, I felt this amazing presence of our democratic history. The insurrection was shocking. Never should have happened in the first place. It should have been prevented. And secondly, it should have been stopped right away. And I'm not going to delve into it any further at this time, but if you have any questions later, I'm happy to try and answer them. But I do want to make just 2 points about it. The rioters had 2 main objectives. One was to harm elected leaders like Speaker Pelosi and Vice President Pence. And they also were about stopping the congressional certification of the presidential election, which is a huge, important part of our election system. It's a ministerial act, but it has to happen before we get that transition of power. And they failed. That's what I need to say. They failed. Democracy held, and it held because of brave Capitol Police. And it also held because of brave congressional leaders of both parties who said, you know what, we're going to certify this election and we're going to do it tonight. as they were cleaning up, you know, a mess. Let me put it that way. Our democracy held just as it held after another terror attack on 9/11, which all of you know well, and all of you stood by us at that time. So now I'm going to transition to a much more positive subject for me, and that is our President, Joe Biden. As David said, I served with him. I served with him for 15 years in the Senate, and I worked with him when he was vice president. But what you may not know is I supported him when I was a House member in the 80s when he ran for president. So I go way, way back with Joe. Now, to truly understand Joe Biden, whether you're in business and you're trying to figure him out, or you're in government or nonprofit, you need to know about Joe's life. And Joe's life has been punctuated by the highs and lows of love and loss, both in his personal life and his political life. He knows pain, and he's striven most of all to prevent it, but if necessary, to learn from it and go on. This resiliency, this compassion makes him, in my view, the leader for the moment as we deal with this unforgiving pandemic, the surge in racism, and the threats of anti-democratic forces in our country and beyond, as you well know. It also is critical, this resiliency, this ability to get back in the arena. It's important when we deal with climate change, because politically we've had a very hard time in America. I've been in the middle of that, in getting people to understand we have to deal with climate change. And Joe gets it. If I call him Joe, it's endearment. It's not disrespect. You know, when you love your grandkids and your kids, as he does, as we all do, we understand that climate change must be front and center, or they won't have a life that they can really enjoy. Clean energy will lead to great jobs. So my point about climate change is that Joe understands it, and he gets the fact that if we're going to serve our kids and grandkids, we have to step up to the plate. And as David said, Joe Biden was the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee when I was in the Senate. And we disagreed a couple of times. I was against the war in Iraq. He was for it, but he eventually said he made a mistake. And we got through it. It was tense. It was hard. But we got through it. Our friendship prevailed. Well, like me, Joe was born during World War II. And the lessons of that war were clear. The incredible dangers of anti-democratic movements must be confronted at home and abroad. And you can't look the other way and say, oh, it's going to be okay. They're just out of the mainstream. You have to confront it. That is not easy. Here in America, it is not easy. Democracy is on the line, though. Extremist movements are everywhere in the world. Now, as we look at the lessons of World War II in my generation and Joe's generation, we know the importance of alliances. And I believe President Biden will double down on his record of working with our allies in Europe and across the world. He knows that the future of democracy is on the line, and human rights, that's on the line. And he knows democracy is being tested in a world where hate and racism is amplified on the internet, and tribalism is stoked on the internet as well. He views an attack on one ally as an attack on all. And then we have to ask, well, how will democratic forces win? And I believe President Biden believes they will win. And it may be, again, be because of the times we live in and the threats that we all saw when we were young and how we overcame them. And I believe he understands that by cooperation and honest dialogue and prosperity, that's how we're going to move forward and have a better future. So this means fair and close trade relationships, a cooperation, again, on human rights, and a new one, public health. You know, we need to do a lot better, you know, across all kinds of borders on public health. We are learning that as we bury the dead, and here we have buried 500,000 people in America. And Joe knows another way to succeed is by lifting up the middle class. And that when it's thriving and growing, the door opens wider, and then anti-democratic forces just don't have a way to get in. That's why we're having a battle now over raising our minimum wage, and why Joe feels strongly about that. It's about the middle class. So President Biden, he's a centrist Democrat. He believes in finding what we in America call, quote unquote, the sweet spot, where you can get people together on a piece of legislation or on a policy, and everyone has a stake in the outcome because they were part of it. And coming in on the heels of Donald Trump, and it took me this long to mention his name, we have moved from a me presidency to a we presidency. And I can't overstate that. We have moved from a me president, look at me. I'm the most important person, you know, in the room, in the country, in the world. That's what we got from Donald Trump, narcissism. And if you look at, in my opinion, and you can make your own decision on it, if you look at the American Psychiatric Association's definition of what a narcissist is, a clinical narcissist, there are 9 points that you have to meet. About 5 of them, he meets 9 of them. So we could no longer afford that kind of a presidency. We have moved toward a normal presidency from an abnormal one. And what I mean, once again, is that we have a president who wants to move beyond his political base and reach out to expand it. You know, because we don't have a parliamentarian government, as you well know, where, you know, you have a party's in charge and the person at the top, you know, if that person's good, it helps keep that party in power. We have every man and woman for himself or herself. And so when you look at this president, he won in places where the congressional people lost, and congressional people won in certain places where he lost. It's a mishmash. It's difficult. And I wouldn't be surprised if you roll your eyes about our system. There are reasons to roll your eyes about our system. But so for Joe Biden, he's got to not only go to his own party, which has a lot of independent-minded people in it, but he's got to reach across. And he is trying to do that. He's trying to unite us as we work to beat COVID-19. And it has battered us all around the globe. And he's trying to unite us as we deal with racism and economic injustice. And I can't say enough, you know, having grown up again in the years of the civil rights movement, as did Joe, and thinking that was, you know, okay now. We were okay. It's not okay. It's bad. And he's dealing with it. And one of the ways he's dealing with it is getting a cabinet put together where we see people who nobody looks like the guy or gal next to them. It is so inclusive. And that is so important. And I found out when I got into politics, I was one of the few women. We have 435 members of the House. I was one of 28 women. And then I was one of 6 women in the Senate of 100. And the phone would ring off the hook from people from all over the country, talk to me and the few other women. And they said, oh my God, thank God somebody's there who understands me and what my life is like. And so that's what's critical. And Joe understands that diversity is a plus, but it needs to have a seat at the table. And our president knows that all of these challenges I've mentioned are not unique to America. I'm sure that you're listening to me and saying, oh, right, it's so what? We have the same problems. Yeah, we do. And Joe knows that. So he's going to reach out broadly to our allies so that we can restore a broad sense of purpose and meaning. And again, after 4 difficult years of an American retreat from thriving alliances, have a new start for America, and in many ways, a new start for the world. So in conclusion, it's good to say goodbye to chaos. It's good to say goodbye to division and racism. It's good to say goodbye to going it alone. And it's good to say hello to empathy, to unity, and normalcy, and alliances abroad. So I hope this gives you some information maybe you didn't have before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. It's time to say goodbye to the chaos. I'm Ali Aslan, international TV presenter and journalist. And I listened very intently to your words, Senator, and the passion you have both for President Biden, but also for the United States very much still comes and shines through. And you already laid out so many of the challenges that the new president will have to tackle. Now, the relief that you have over the new president is probably shared by many in Europe. But is it fair to say that despite the hope, despite the sigh of relief that Europe has displayed upon Biden's election, that it's really the domestic challenges such as battling the pandemic that President Biden has to tend to first?
Absolutely. But you know what? As President Biden would say, you have to do more than one thing at a time. And no one person can do that, but you put together a team. And when you hear from the wonderful Mr. Ziegler, he was part of a team for a really good president. And no president does it alone. But what does he do when faced with this horrific pandemic? He puts together the most top-notch people you could find anywhere. I know a lot of them. And he takes Dr. Fauci out of the back of the room where he was scared to say a word with Trump and puts him in the front. So he knows that he's got a top-notch team there. He cannot wait to talk. He has to talk to foreign leaders. He has to deal with our economy, which is linked to COVID. He's got to get judges on the court. He's got to get his cabinet confirmed. So I would say a president can't just do one thing, and he's got immigration issues. So you can't do one thing at a time as much as you want to. These things are all in crisis, frankly. Everything, including foreign relations. You gotta do it all. And if anyone can do it, it's Joe. No learning curve. He's served it, he's a creature of the American political system since he's in his 20s. So I think he's doing everything, and you can't just say, I'll only do this, because people are hurting in our country and they need economic relief as well as COVID relief.
Thank you, David. Would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I believe that Morris is so infatuated with what he just heard and he knows is coming that he's decided that he's going to skip speaking today so that we can hear from the real experts who have lived this. And so, Ali, I believe you wanted to introduce the next speaker.
Indeed. Thank you so much, David. Yes, we started very strongly with Senator Barbara Boxer, and certainly we are continuing very strongly. Our next speaker has over 5 decades of experience in management, finance, law, education, and public policy. He spent 17 years as an investment banker and 18 years as a practicing lawyer. Among other, he served as commissioner of the Immigration and Naturalization Service and as sergeant at arms of the US Senate. This is just to name a few of his many relevant professional stops. Currently, he's a senior counsel at the Washington, D.C. law firm of Van Ness Feldman. It's a great pleasure, delight, and honor to have him with us. James Ziegler is with us. James, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Ali and David, for that kind introduction. And I particularly appreciate the opportunity to participate in this roundtable discussion. Senator Boxer, we've already had a chance to chat earlier, but it's really nice to see you again. It's been a long time, but it sure doesn't seem that long.
Right.
If the participants today are expecting me to provide a defense of Donald Trump, I'm afraid you're going to be sorely disappointed. I do believe that there were some good policies that emerged from the Trump administration, and we certainly can talk about those during the discussion period. But the long-term damage that his presidency inflicted on the United States completely undermined any good that might have come from his time in office, and at least that's my opinion. I also need to note that, for the record, that after 50 years as a registered Republican with service in 3 Republican administrations and as Sergeant at Arms of the Senate, as Ali mentioned, under Republican control, I'm now a registered independent. But enough of that. Let's talk about an America that is divided and seems to be at war with itself. Some would say that we've never been more divided, and I certainly won't argue with that. It's no surprise that partisans in this conflict are blaming and demonizing the other side, ignoring history, refusing to be introspective and to compromise, and of course, always looking for a fall guy, whether it's Trump, Mitch McConnell, or Nancy Pelosi. But the reality is that political divisions and even violence have been part of our representative democracy since our very early days. Let me give you just a few examples, and there are a lot, but I'm just going to give you a few to provide a little bit of historical context. First, the most divided, as you all know, we've ever been was during the time of our Civil War, and thankfully, the Union prevailed. The early 1900s experienced a progressive movement that was marked by anarchy, terrorism, and deep divisions in the country, including a bombing of the Capitol building. I expect many of you will remember the 1960s and 70s, and I grew up, I was born during the war, at the end of the war, so I experienced the 60s and 70s. And that brought us the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, Watergate, and a very violent time in our country with assassinations, bombings, riots, and threats to our governmental institutions. Indeed, on March 1, 1971, a bomb was placed in the Capitol just below the Senate chamber and was detonated in the middle of the night. And then on May 1, 1971, a massive and violent anti-war protest occurred in Washington that threatened the Capitol building and other government buildings. As a result, 12,000 people were arrested and incarcerated in the largest mass arrest in Washington, D.C. history. I might also mention that during that period of time, I actually was working at the Department of Justice. What a lot of people don't know is that the Marine barracks over at 8th and I Street, Senator, I'm sure you've been over there, was actually mobilized to protect the Capitol, but you didn't see them, but they were there and they were mobilized. So we've had some difficult times. I offer these past examples of violence directed at the seat of our representative democracy, not to justify or diminish the importance of what happened on January 6th, but quite the contrary. The events of January 6th stand in sharp contrast to those earlier events in one important respect that the senator has already pointed out. The attack on the Capitol was not a protest, but an attempt to threaten, intimidate, and force our elected representatives into reversing the will of the people and install an unelected president in the White House, thereby destroying the very, the very foundation of the country that these terrorists seem to be convinced that it was being stolen from them. The American experience and experiment has endured and survived many challenges, and I am absolutely confident that we will survive this too, but it's not going to be easy. President Biden faces a challenge that Abraham Lincoln faced. He must reunite a very divided country. Now, I've had the privilege of being casually acquainted with the president since the 1970s, and I have confidence in his integrity and desire to do what is right for the country. I also recognize that he has to deal with great pressure from those who helped elect him and from a very powerful far-left faction in the Democratic Party. That is a moral hazard faced by any president, and it takes courage to lead in the face of such pressure. I'd like to give you a few thoughts on what I think President Biden needs to do and not do in the foreseeable future, particularly if he wants to unify the country. First and foremost, he needs to stay laser focused on his three big promises that he made to the American people. First, to win the pandemic battle. Second, to rebuild the economy where it has been hurt by the pandemic. And third, to unify the nation and restore bipartisanship. I hasten to add that although President Biden's priorities at the moment appear to be, and must be, frankly, in the domestic arena, he is a creature of the world of foreign relations, and his nominees thus far exhibit his particular interest and concern in that area. The president clearly understands that America cannot go it alone, and that our alliances, particularly the transatlantic alliance, are critical to the future of the West. But please don't be lulled into a sense of complacency, because the Democratic Party has strong isolationist and protectionist elements. The president will have to be a hard negotiator on many issues. But I think that our allies can once again feel secure that there won't be any big surprises and that our word and commitments are good. The president's domestic goals are inextricably intertwined, and in particular, if he mishandles either the pandemic or the economy, he will almost invariably fail to bridge the partisan and cultural divide in our country, as well as failing to achieve other of his goals. So what should the president do? First, he needs to recognize and acknowledge that almost 75 million Americans voted for Donald Trump, and there must be a reason why. I would suggest that the majority of those who voted for Trump did so because they felt they had no good choice, not because they were white supremacists or deplorables, although there were plenty of them voting for Trump. The voters were average Americans who have felt ignored, disrespected, used, and abused by the system. And some were very troubled about the leftward surge in the Democratic Party. Joe Biden needs to understand their concerns and talk to them from his heart and not from a teleprompter. A guy from Scranton, Pennsylvania should be able to do that. And I know he can do that because I've been with him when he's done it. Second, Joe Biden should stop letting the ghost of Donald Trump define him and influence his decisions and actions. That is exactly what Donald Trump wants. He needs to continue his sometimes unsuccessful effort to stop talking about or even alluding to Trump. And he needs to quit blaming Trump for all the bad things he inherited, even if true. President Biden seems to have forgotten that Trump made Obama look better than he was because Trump kept blaming Obama for everything. Third, the president needs to avoid biting off more issues and controversies than he can chew at the same time. And he needs to be particularly conscious of the political capital that he will be risking in pushing too many issues too quickly and thereby getting ahead of the American public, whether it's canceling the Keystone Pipeline project, forgiving student debt, expanding healthcare coverage, opening negotiations with Iran, pushing for comprehensive immigration reform, attacking the fossil fuels industry, or a host of other issues that are dear to the hearts of Democrats. The president risks wasting his political capital with the American public by taking on too much too quickly. Finally, the president should not abandon the political center, a place he has been almost all of his career. And he also needs to fully embrace bipartisanship, something for which he was known as a senator and which helped make him successful. I predict that the independent political center will grow in the US in reaction to the increasingly powerful and extreme elements on the right and left that are dominating both of our political parties. And if this happens, you can rest assured that the party that moves back to the center will prevail. I still believe that the American public is fundamentally moderate, some center left, some center right, and that they will assert themselves even if our leaders don't or won't. And will do that in order to right the ship of state. Joe Biden can and should lead that parade, but it will take an extraordinary level of political courage. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, James, for your introductory remark, wide encompassing indeed, and pointing out very much, as Senator Boxer has done, the many domestic and foreign policy challenges that this new president is facing. You pointed out correctly, 75 million Trump voters are certainly a warning for the time ahead, something or a segment of the US society that he certainly needs to bring on board as well. James, before I go to Morris, let me just point out, because we heard President Joe Biden at the Munich Security Conference last week saying, America is back, the transatlantic alliance is back. Now, obviously, those are statements, those are messages that the international community and Europe has been dying to hear for 4 years. But isn't it true, with all the goodwill that is certainly existing on all sides and Joe Biden being a proven transatlanticist, that it's not the transatlantic alliance that is Joe Biden's #1 foreign policy priority, but China?
Well, I suspect, yes. But you have to understand that Biden sees the world as it is. And Joe Biden, correct me, Senator Boxer, you know a lot more about his views on foreign policy. But Joe Biden sees the world as it is, and he sees it as more or less one thing that he has to work with. The transatlantic, we can't have a bad transatlantic relationship and deal with China. If we're going to deal with China, we've got to deal with China and Russia together as the West. And I think that Biden probably is just as focused on getting that transatlantic alliance and get our other alliances that have been damaged so terribly, getting them back together so that we can speak, not as the United States, but as the free world. And so I think the transatlantic alliance, when you really look at it historically, maybe it is the most important alliance we've got. Joe Biden understands that, and it's necessary to whatever happens to be his #1 foreign policy priority at any particular moment. I could be wrong, Senator Boxer, but that's the way I see Biden and I see his philosophy.
Thank you. And I will, of course, involve Senator Boxer in just a moment, because she pointed out correctly, no US president has the luxury to just focus on one topic alone. Quite on the contrary, you have to look at the many issues that the US is facing. Before I go back to Senator Boxer and widen the round, of course, I do want to include Morris Reed, who's a partner at Mercury, a high-stakes public strategy firm. Morris, thanks for joining us. I take it you have been able to listen to Senator Boxer and James Ziegler speak. I want to give you an opportunity to just very quickly respond to what you've heard.
Well, I think there's been enough talking. I think why don't we just get into the Q&A? We have some good people on the line. I'd rather take questions from them than to hear more talking heads. But Senator Boxer knows I always agree with her, and it's good to have the former Sergeant at Arms on the line. But let's get to the Q&A if we can.
Well, there you go. Spoken like a true partner at a strategy firm. Let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into it. And then let me ask you, because we did speak about the fact that America is back and the sigh of relief that Europe has been displaying upon his election. But many people speak of a new Cold War when it comes to US-China relations. There are so many issues that those two countries have to hammer out: trade, Taiwan, Hong Kong, the Uyghur issue, 5G, South China Sea, on and on and on. How do you think this will be evolving? How do you think this will play out?
Well, it's a competitive issue. China is now the chief competitor for America on the global stage. This is something that if Donald Trump would have led with, and oftentimes, as James said, with Donald Trump, it wasn't the message, it was the messenger. This is something that Democrats and Republicans agree on. It's going to have to be a sophisticated, nuanced approach that will require engagement, a lot of carrot and a stick. But there's no question that China is now a major competitor, not just for the United States, but for Europe as well. And the best way to deal with a competitor is to engage them. So I would imagine the reason that the president is engaging so holistically on the global stage is because he knows he's going to need a coalition to engage China. China has been growing and been very aggressive, sometimes acting good, sometimes acting bad. But the only way to deal with an adversary on the global stage is to engage them. So we expect that this is an administration that will engage. As you guys know, we just ran the successful campaign for the new Director General of the WTO. It was all about engaging the US and China. So I think that Joe Biden is a guy who will understand that he can't go it alone. China's a competitor, and it will take a multifaceted, nuanced approach to deal with it.
Thank you, Morris, for your remarks. This is a good reminder to remind everyone, a good opportunity to remind everyone listening in. You are more than welcome to chime in and contribute your questions at this particular point, which we will, of course, be happy to include in the remaining 25-30 minutes. Senator Boxer, I want to give you also the opportunity to respond to the competition, clear competition between US and China out there. How do you see this one evolving? Donald Trump obviously was very harsh on China. As a matter of fact, made it one of his #1 campaign promises that he's going to be tough on China, ridiculing President Biden that he's going to be very soft. And if you vote for Biden, then you know, God have mercy on us, and that sort of nonsense. How do you see this one?
Well, President Biden is not going to be soft on China, and he's not going to demonize China. And I totally agree with James, and I absolutely think that Morris is right on as well. We can't do it alone. It's a world competition for hearts and minds, for trade, for everything. And so you can't just say, we're going to just go it alone. I really liked what James said about the fact that Joe sees everything as a we, not a me. I mean, I use that all the time, and it's just true. You know, it's like all of us in our own relationships. If we're having a problem, some of us will handle it totally alone, and some of us will get some kind of consensus view as to how to deal with the problem. And that's him. He's going to do that. And he'll be tough when he has to be tough, but I think he wants to find ways to lessen and tampen down the anger and the demonization. So it's going to be an issue at a time. And I think it's going to mean that there'll be more respect there. And it's not easy. It's not easy. I don't mean to say it is. A lot of times it's pretty clear what's going on with human rights. It just breaks your heart. And so it has to be done in a way, because China is very aware of the world stage and the way she looks to the world. And, you know, China's sending vaccines to various parts of the world. You saw that our president just contributed billions to the WHO, or to the UN, I think it was, to also do that. So it's a competition at every level, which I believe Joe thinks we have to deal with it with the democracies of the world.
Both you and James have talked extensively about the anti-democratic forces around the world, but in the US in particular these days, which is why, Senator Boxer, there's a question here from one of the participants, Ulrike Köhler. She's asking, how do you think threats of anti-democratic moves in the US can be managed in the near future?
Oh, we have tremendous challenges. And we have a situation going on that there are cults out there that are influencing people. It's gotten so bad that families are having, you know, arguments. Listen to what I think will happen. With a president who is respected, and I just looked at his approval rating, it's pretty good. I mean, even with the 74 million people who voted for Trump, 80 million voted for Joe, but Politico yesterday had him close to 60% approval and 36% disapproval. That's pretty great. And the thing I want to say is, in our country, and James pointed out the violent threads, and he weaved them, I thought, beautifully together. But in our country, we've always had, you know, very harsh differences over the years. And we have been able to work by by pushing forward a compromise, a sweet spot, a way to deal with it. And I just wanted to comment on how the question was, how do you deal with it? I think what James Ziegler did by becoming an independent, he is no way a Democrat. He does not agree. I know that. He is an independent. What does that mean? And just to explain it to those of you who are used to other systems, it means that there's going to be a growing group of people in the middle, okay, who are going to look for the best that each party can put forward. And it's interesting because I've said this before and everyone says they don't agree with me, but James said it. He sees the way forward with people who don't believe in the extremes coming together and being a very powerful force for good, I think, in our country. And that's what I think is going to happen. And that's what I think is going to work. But let me close with this. This was a violent attack on the United States Capitol. We haven't had such an attack on the Capitol. Yes, we've had a couple of things which were laid out by James, but we haven't had anything like this since the War of 1812, where the Capitol was burned. This cannot be just, pushed to the side. And we have to recognize that there is no room for violence in our country. We decide things via the ballot box. So it's going to take a lot of hard work, but I do think those courageous enough to become independents, and I don't see the left at this point in the Democratic Party being as, shall we say, extreme as the right. It could happen, but I think this idea that we could have a sensible center that will make these choices is going to save us in the long run.
Thank you, Senator. James, let's take in another question from our audience members. Federico Foders is asking, what are the chances for a new transatlantic trade and investment agreement between the US and the EU?
Was that directed to me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you feel comfortable enough to answer that.
Well, it's not an area that, as the senator calls, my sweet spot, but I have no doubt that the Biden administration, and particularly the people in his foreign policy trade area, who are very, very good people. Tony Blinken is a great guy, and I think you will see that they will address those kinds of issues going forward. Could I make one comment back about something the senator said just a moment ago? Back in the 60s and 70s, I actually worked in the Senate in the 60s, Senator. And the 70s, I actually had some involvement in national security matters. And I can tell you, going that far back and way before that, the United States has always had these cults, as the senator refers to them. And we've had these little groups of conspiracy theorists and stuff like that. But they've always been pretty confined because they simply weren't tolerated. Most of the leaders in our country just marginalized them, and the people in the communities marginalized them. And so while they had these crazy ideas, they really didn't have any real oomph or real power. The problem that occurred is we had a president of the United States who encouraged this kind of stuff. And when the president of the United States says that, to these nutcases, hey, stand by. Boy, you're talking about bringing them out of the shadows, and then it takes on a momentum. And I don't care how hard you work, you can't put that genie back in a bottle easily. Now, I think what's going to happen is that President Biden and the people around President Biden and and Republicans of good faith and local leaders are going to start marginalizing, or have already started. You can see it actually. They're starting to marginalize these groups, and they're going to have to go back into the shadows where they've been all throughout our history, at least certainly in the 20th century and late 19th century. So I think the election of Biden also sends a message that we're not going to have a president who is going to actually encourage that kind of thing, which is just appalling as an American.
Thank you. Morris,
Alex, let me address that
yes,
trade
please.
question.
Thank you.
So there's two things on the trade thing. So for the Biden guys, everything will begin and end with boxing in China. So I think that you'll see more of a focus on Asia. He's already made this clear. You look at some of the way he's structuring the White House, his national security team, everyone has a China expert. So the supply chain issues are going to be first and foremost for these guys. So anything boxing in China. The second thing that's going to be important to these guys is fixing the WTO. You've already saw that they still have an issue with the appellate situation, the appellate court situation there. That is as important to Europe as it is to the United States. So those are probably going to be the two things that are coming out the box with the trade situation. One thing that I do want to make a note on trade, and this is in particular for the German business people on the line. I think it was shocking, and I think that you guys were caught a little flat-footed when Donald Trump took a very adverse positioning against Germany, meaning Germany Inc., the country, and the companies were not prepared to really engage at a sophisticated level they should have. As Biden flying over, I apologize. But the German business community needs to really engage more. If you care about trade with Europe and the United States strengthening the trade relation, German business community needs to really dig deeper so that you don't have a situation where the government is caught flat-footed and the business community has to scramble to try to figure things out.
Certainly have been taken noted by our German participants listening into this conversation. Many more questions reaching us. Happy to pass them on as they come in. Senator Boxer, I just want to, one country has not come up yet, Russia. I do want to make the point that that's also going to be one of the major challenges for the president. We see it in Belarus. We see it with very current events in Georgia. And of course, the Nord Stream 2 topic is going to be one that has the potential to deteriorate transatlantic relations. Just a brief word on Russia's role.
Oh, well, just given the prior 4 years with this weird, strange, inexplicable bromance between Trump and Putin, you know, you're going to see something completely different, which is, you know, who are you? Why are you messing with us? What are you doing? And why are you jailing your opposition? And human rights will be front and center. And I think you're going to see an administration that really stands up to Putin all around. And, you know, to the extent that that can be done with the Europeans, with our allies in Europe, it will be done with our allies in Europe. But I think Russia cuts so deep with us here, at least most of us, with what they did in our election, and all the crazy things that went on with Ukraine and all the rest. It's a lot of baggage that accumulated over 4 years. So I think you can expect to see President Biden be very straightforward, very transparent, and try to put together those alliances that James and I talked about that he believes are so important to confront people like Putin.
Many more questions are coming in. It's a nice potpourri, very diverse questions. Actually, one, James, directed towards you. From a perspective as a now independent Republican, what are the chances you see for a third party emerging in the United States in the future?
Let me correct your description. I am an independent. I am not an independent Republican. The Republican has been erased so far from my my title. The answer is I don't see very much possibility of a third party unless the Republican Party goes the way of the Federalist Party. Now, something I didn't talk about in the history was at the beginning of the 1800s, late 1700s, early 1800s, there was a party called the Federalist Party, and it was in power. And it decided that, since they were in power, they could do anything they wanted to. And they passed something called the Alien and Sedition Act. And they then started imprisoning without due process their political opponents. They started torturing some of them. They did all sorts of things that were totally unconstitutional and totally inconsistent with the philosophy of our country, our purpose. And that party died. The American people just rose up and said, enough of that. And the party had to go away. It just completely disappeared. The Republican Party could have that happen to it if it doesn't get its act together. I don't think so. I think ultimately the center will prevail in this country. And as I mentioned in my remarks, and that the parties are both going to have to move back to that center. I think it's highly unlikely that we will see a successful third party. We've seen a lot of third parties, but none of them have been successful.
Morris, let me come back to you.
Yeah, let me just talk about this.
Go ahead.
Let me put a finer point on this. There will never be a third party in America if there's no financial backing. In American politics, money matters. That's the bottom line. And until there is going to be ample money to move to a third party, there will never be a significant third party in this country. So from an ideological standpoint, you can have independents, you can have conservatives, you can have central left, center right. It doesn't matter. If you're talking about hardcore politics in America, you have to couple that with financial resources. And unless you're going to have an independent candidate of a Barack Obama type of ilk who was able to raise $1 billion of small donations, I'm not for sure he would have been able to do that without the infrastructure of the Democratic Party. So money matters in American politics. So until we remove money, and it's all about ideological and thoughts and thought leadership, we're going to only have two parties. And that's just the hardcore facts about American politics. Money still matters here.
Money matters in U.S. politics. Money, of course, matters in transatlantic relations. Morris, what do you see as the biggest stumbling block moving forward in transatlantic relations? I already mentioned Nord Stream.
Look, I mean, the biggest stumbling block. Yeah, the biggest stumbling block in India is a lack of leadership. And that is what we've seen. The rise of Donald Trump also speaks to the deterioration of leadership. And this is not a phenomenon that's just in America. It's all over the world. There's a lack of leadership. And when you have weak leaders, you have fringe elements that are able to rise. So to me, the biggest threat to the global order is real leadership. Until we're able to continue to have good leaders putting good things forward and engaging people. And the fact is, as Senator Box, we call myself a Ron Brown Democrat. Until the Democrats start to engage and stop demonize business, we're going to always have these issues. The thing that matters the most, and I don't care about the storming of the Capitol or other deals. When people have a job and they're gainfully employed, they don't have time to worry about these fringe elements. So as business people on the phone, the biggest thing is leadership, and corporate leadership also matters. I always joke with my friends around the world and say, why do you think it's called corporate America? It's because they have a voice. The corporate community, the German business community, and the business community around the world needs to show as much leadership as they're looking for politics. And in a lot of ways, small and medium-sized businesses, you guys know this, your employees look to you more so than they do the elected leadership. So to me, it's all leadership, 1, 2, 3 through 10.
Leadership.
I'm sorry. I was going to add something to that, because if you look at this horrific racism that we're dealing with in our country, and you saw corporate America step up, and you saw them also step up when there was, big discrimination against LGBTQ. Corporations really stepped up. I'm looking for them to step up on climate more than they have. And I think when they do, because I agree, it's critical, for all the reasons Morris said, and and it's very important. These are the job creators, but they also have a strong voice on some of these other issues and could play a very big role, whether it's anti-cultism and all these other things. Once you started seeing some of corporate America say, you know what, we're not going to have our convention in this particular city because they have terrible laws against gays, or they're not handling the issue of a voter registration right, or they're putting their knee on the neck of people. So I think Morris is so right to bring that up. It's very important in America. I think Joe Biden understands that.
Thank you. Being very mindful of the time because we only have a few minutes left. Time flies when you're having fun, and this has certainly been a very productive and informative discussion. Let's do a very quick final round amongst the three speakers. The title of today's session is The New United States. Let's do it in the reverse order this time. Morris, what does the new United States stand for? What do you want the new United States to stand for?
First, let me give you guys some insight on what the new United States means as far as in Washington, and particularly understanding this president. One of the things I always tell people is that this guy is more of a Ronald Reagan second term, meaning he is senior, he understands things, he doesn't have to, as you guys know, pulling government together takes about a year, and then you got to figure out what the bathrooms are. Joe Biden doesn't have that problem given that he's been here. But the structure and understanding the new Washington is fundamental. The chief of staff in the White House, Ron Klain, is extremely, extremely important. And for your business community, and guys, when you're looking at your foreign direct investment in America, you have to understand the difference between Republicans and Democrats. Constituencies, local elected officials, these type of groups matter. So if you're looking for the new and engaging in America with this president, you need to understand fundamentally the pulse of where things are going to happen. The chief of staff is going to be uber important. And you need to understand when you're making investments around the country, making sure that you're connecting to the local elected officials, not just spending your time in Washington, D.C. Certainly, Senator Boxer would tell you she cared more about her constituents in California than she did lobbyists showing up in Washington, D.C. So if you're understanding the new Washington, it's the old Washington. It's the boring Washington. The boring's the new sexy. Understand how to engage, where to engage, and what constituent groups really matter to this president. And then you can go about engaging in the right way and making sure that Germany has the right type of relationship with America going forward.
Thank you so much. Boring is the new sexy. Let's have that printed on our T-shirts going forward. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for your assessments, especially addressing the business leaders that are joining this call. Morris, thank you so much. James, last question to you. Same question. The new United States, if you were to define what it looks like, what you want it to look like, what would it be?
Well, that's a big question. But what would I like to see happen during Joe Biden's term and going forward is I think that first, we need reconciliation in the country among all the warring factors, if you will, and a recognition that we all are sometimes right and sometimes wrong, but we have to recognize the value of others and we have to respect that. And I think that the other thing that a little story, back when I was in, I had known Senator Ted Kennedy for a very long time, going back to the 60s. Kennedy once said to me that his philosophy in the Senate was, if I can get 50% of what I want, I will take it, and then I'll keep coming back for the other 50%. And I thought that said a lot about compromise and how we can govern. If we don't have to have everything our way, and if we don't believe that that we're the only ones that are right and everybody else is wrong, then we can have reconciliation and we can be reunified and we can develop respect for each other and go back to some of those fundamental values that's still out there from our Constitution. That's the America I'd like to see.
Thank you so much, James, for your final remarks, statements, and assessments about the United States going forward, about what you would like the country to look like moving forward. Senator Boxer, we started with you. We're going to end with you. Final words. We know how deeply you care about the country, not just through the public service of many years, but also your opening remarks very much reflected that. The new United States, according to Senator Boxer.
Okay, I'm going to go back to my remarks and be very brief. It's goodbye to chaos, division, and going it alone. And it's hello to normalcy, unity, and alliances abroad. That's it.
Short and sweet, very precise. Thank you so much to Senator Boxer, to James Ziegler, and of course to Morris Reed and I think I speak for all who have joined this call and discussion, for a very, very enriching, very knowledgeable, very informative discussion that we've had on the current United States and the new United States at its very current states and moving forward. It's been a pleasure moderating this session, and it's my great pleasure for the wrap up to hand it back over to our host, to Yasmin.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ali. Thank you so much, Senator Boxer, Jim, Morris, and David, for making this evening really special. It was really amazing. It was a great overview about the new United States and actually about the United States, how it is and how it was in the past. So thank you so much to everybody. Thank you so much to all the attendees and to all these great questions. Without you, it wouldn't have been such a lively discussion. So for you guys in the US, have a great day. So it just starts. I see, Boris, it's a sunny day, so enjoy it. And to all of our German participants, have a good night and thank you so much.